Hey, this is Max here, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about how you can use external requests in ManageIt. It's going to be a bit techy, it's like a bit technical, but I'm not a programmer, I know you're also not, so I'll just try to explain this step by step. Okay, let's dive in. So let's first talk about the why. Like, why would we use these external requests in the first place? Well, I think they're really crucial, they're really important, and they allow us to make our messenger bot smarter and also to integrate other tools with it so that we can do all kinds of fun things. So what is the external request? Now, an external request is an action inside ManageIt. It's like a yellow thing that you can throw in there, and this allows you to send and also receive all kinds of data to or from other places on the internet. So you could, for example, trigger an Integromat webhook, or you could send stuff to your server, or use like special scripts to get certain info, like the current day and time. So I will go over to ManageIt now, and then I will show you what the configuration window looks like. You'll see that it has like 6 different things. So it has a request type, request URL, headers, body, response, and response mapping. So right here, I have some examples. We're going to talk about those later. But first, I want to show you how you can actually add one. So inside the flow builder, you go over to the right, and then you can click perform action. And then you go over here, and then when you scroll down, you will see external request. So this is what we're going to talk about in this tutorial. So when you click this, you will see this window. So this is what they call the configuration window. This is where you can configure your whole external request. So the request type, that's this. So you have a post or get. Now these two things, they're really similar. The only difference is that with get, you don't have a body. See, I cannot click it here. And you have to enter all the data that you want to send over in your URL. But most often you will use post, and then you can also add all the data into your request body, and this is also a bit more secure. And really, I'm almost always using post. Really rarely, sometimes a tool requires the get, but then it will just tell you that, and it will also explain you what you have to do in the URL. So I'm going to mainly talk about post right here. Now then you have the request URL. So where are you going to make this request? And this link, they also say it here, it has to be a HTTPS link. So that means that it's like a secured link so that the data that you send over is secured. And then we have headers. So you can add request headers. And sometimes you need this, for example, for authentication. If you need to authorize that you're allowed to perform this request to that certain server. For example, if you want to send something over to your ESP, like ActiveCampaign, then you have to enter your API code, or like your API, to tell ActiveCampaign that you're allowed to do this. Otherwise, everybody could just like add contacts, delete contacts in your account. It would be really bad, right? So I will show you also an example of this later. Then we have the body. And this is basically where all the fun is happening, at least I think so. So here you write like a little JSON code. We're also going to do that in a bit. And this is basically what we are going to send over to that URL. So this data. And what we can do also, we can also add the full subscriber data. So I click this, and then you'll see here that it will automatically generate a whole JSON code for us with all the data. And we can also add variables. So if you do not want to add like everything into this, you can also only use like a first name variable. So you can do that. But when you do that, you have to make sure that this one is always checked or unchecked. Let me check. Like if you write it like this, then you would say first name, and then we close it. I'll also explain later how this works. Then you see now that I entered this variable, but I get an invalid JSON. So when you do this wrong, it will also tell you that you do it wrong, and it will also tell you where. So right now it says token M at position 11. That is my first name, Max M. And what you have to do is you have to make sure that this thing is unchecked if you write a JSON code like this. So more on this later. Then we go over to the response. So the response, you always get some kind of response back. So if you send something, for example, you trigger a webhook from Integramod, then they will tell you whether it's accepted or not accepted, or maybe if no scenario is listening. So if you would click this, it will just give you like an indication of what you're trying to do went well. Now, then we have response mapping, and response mapping is also really cool. So when you get that response back from whatever you're trying to do, then you can save parts of that response into a custom field. And this is really handy for lots of things, like really the possibilities are counted. You could, for example, subscribe someone to a webinar, and then you get a response back from the webinar provider. So it depends a bit what you're using, right? But for example, Demio, which I'm using, would send back something like, okay, registered, and here is the unique URL that the subscriber can join with. So then we can store, and we can say something like, I'm not sure if that's this one, join URL, and then we could say, okay, we're going to store the join URL into the webinar unique URL custom field. So this is really handy. We'll also show you an example of that later, but this is basically how that window works. So this is the request. You have the request type. Most often you're going to use post. Sometimes you're going to use get. When you use get, you cannot use the body. So yeah, I really like the post because then you can enter the body, and there you can enter your JSON code with everything you want to send over. Then you have the response. So it's really good to test things. And yeah, you have the response mapping, that you can map the response, and then you tell here what the JSON path is. So I'll explain that later, in which custom field we have to save this. So let's go back over here. So we did this. So how do you write a simple JSON code? Well, you really don't have to be a programmer for this. Like, it's really easy. And yeah, I just want to tell, like, I'm also really not a programmer. Like, I'm really bad at it. And I just took a look at this. I followed some tutorials. I read some things about JSON. I was like, oh shit, that's super easy. So you're going to learn right now how you are going to write some JSON. So I already did it here a bit. So let's say that we want to make some kind of request somewhere, and we want to tell them something about, I don't know, let's come up with like bananas and the amount of bananas. So what you want to do is you always have to open with a curly bracket. So this is how you do that. So you open with a curly bracket, then you do an enter, and then you have to use quotation marks. So you type 1, and then you have the key. So this is basically the name of the value. So let's say that I would say fruit, and then I would do a colon, and then I would again do a quotation mark, and then I have to give the value of fruit. So then I would say bananas. And then we could already close it with another curly bracket. And then you also see here that the error when I close it will also disappear. So then you know that you did your JSON well. Now, but what if I now want to tell how many bananas? So then I would say, so I would do a comma here. And then again, you also see that you get an error again. And then I would do quotation mark. I would say amount, quotation mark, colon, quotation mark, and then I would say 3, quotation mark, and then no comma. So I know lots of people do this wrong. So you only have to use a comma. You see it right here. I can also zoom in. You only have a comma when you want to tell like, hey, there is going to be another row. There's going to be another row. But if you would do that here, then you will see here that you also get an error. So never do that. So you have the open and the close. Then you have the key, or like the name of the value, I already call it, and then the value itself. So the value of the key. So here it would say, now the fruit is bananas. And then next value, so comma. And then the next row is amount. and then you always have these in between, and then I say 3, and then no comma, and then we close. So that's basically how you write JSON. It's really simple. You can also make it more complicated by using arrays. So that's like a value inside a value inside a value, but you will probably not use that. You're not going to need that. And otherwise, there's probably also documentation about that on the internet, but let's keep it simple for now. With this, you can basically do everything. So let's write a different code, but this time we're going to use some variables. So let's say that I want to add this person to my email service provider. So the JSON code would look like this. So I would open with a curly bracket. I have a quotation mark, and then I would say first name. So you always use an underscore and not a space, because otherwise the JSON is also not so happy. Then we have a colon, then we have a quotation mark, and then you would click here, add a variable, and then you would click here, first name. And then you have to deselect this. So otherwise it would encode to JSON, but we're already making a JSON code, so it's not necessary. So we click that, and then we close with another quotation mark. And then I also want to add the last name, quotation mark, colon, quotation mark, and then variable, and then I'll click here with last name, and then quotation mark, comma, and then I want to add the email. So I do it like this. So then I go down here. So these are like all the standard things that you have from your subscriber. And here are all your custom fields. So I have lots of custom fields, and you can use all of those inside your request. So I have an email custom field. This is the custom field where I save all the email addresses of my subscribers. So when I capture an email address, I store it in this custom field. And then I would deselect this again. I would close it, and then I also want to add the ManyChat ID. So what I want to do is I click here user ID, I deselect this, and then I do another quotation mark, and then I do an enter, not a comma, and then I close it. And then here you see a preview of my first name, my last name. Now my profile does not have an email address right now, but otherwise you would see that here. And then you see my ManyChat ID. So if you would save this, then it says only HTTPS links are allowed. So yeah, there is nothing in here. I'll just put like an example. So then we can save it. So let's go back over here. So that's basically how you do that. And then I want to show you an example of how you can use external requests to trigger Integromat webhooks. So Integromat is really, really cool. I'll give you like maybe a quick tour in a bit how that works. But what we want to do is we want to trigger a webhook. So we're going to create a webhook in Integromat. Then we trigger this, and then it goes into Integromat, and Integromat will send the current day back, so that we can say here, have a great, now today's Tuesday, I'm making this on a Tuesday, have a great Tuesday. So how does that work? So we go over to this external request. Well, I already created it. I also have the scenario here. It's like a super simple scenario. So basically what Integromat is doing, I can give you some other examples here probably, is you can create all kinds of scenarios, they call it, and then you can integrate tools with each other. So here, for example, I integrated ManyChat with the Google Calendar, but you can do all kinds of cool things. Here I'm doing something with ActiveCampaign and Slack. If you go down here, then you see here that I do something with that I upload a file from ManyChat. So somebody gives me a file inside ManyChat or inside Messenger. Then I get the file and then I upload the file to Google Drive. So you can use it for all kinds of crazy cool things. Like here I'm checking if the calendar is free. But right now I just want to keep it simple. So we have the first step, and I'm also going to delete the second step. So this is how you create your scenario. Or maybe also delete this one. We just start from scratch. And then I say webhook. And then I say here, custom webhook. And then I already created one, but otherwise you have to create a new one, which you can do here. Then you can give it a name. So this one I called the current day webhook. And then you see here that I get the URL. So this URL is the request URL of the external request. So that's this URL right here. Now, about the head, sorry, almost dying here. So about the headers, you don't really have to worry. But about the body also not, by the way. And then we have the response. And the cool thing is it's going to be the response mapping. So we're going to trigger this webhook. We basically don't send anything with it. Like we would not have to send like the subscriber's name or something or an email address, because we don't need that for this scenario. If you would add the contact to your email service provider with Integramod, then you would do that. But in this case, we only want to get the current day of the week back so that we can use it in the conversation here, right? So we can say like, hey, have a great current day. So what we want to do is we trigger this. So I'm going to click here, redetermine data structure. And then you see that this thing is like spinning here, right? So if I would click this, then it says accepted. So you see that you get a code. It says 200, okay. So that you know that the request was like successful. Like if you would, for example, put here something random, and if I would then test the request, then you would say 404 not found. So let's go back to this one. And then you see here that it now already is giving this. That is because I saved it, or I didn't save it because I already created it. So we go over this current day. Now we did that. And then we want to send a webhook response. So we click this response. And then we're going to write the JSON code again. So we open it with a curly bracket. And then I'm going to say current day, then another quotation mark, and then a colon, quotation mark. And then we want to insert the current day of the week so that we can send that back over to ManyChat. So what we do is we're going to use this function here, and this is already a bit more advanced, but I think it's fun to show you how this works. So we're going to format the date, and we're going to use a now timestamp. So we're going to format now, so now, to the current day of the week, which is DDD, so 4 times D. That will give you like the name of the current day of the week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. And then we close it again. And then we're also going to close this JSON code. And then we're going to hit OK. And then I click Save. And then we're going to click Run Once. Now, then I'm going to click Test the Request. And then you will see here that we have the JSON response. It says current day is Tuesday. Like I could also, you can put everything in there, right? You can also say, let's say that we also want to add something else. For example, we want to do current month. So we do this, then we say format date, then we're going to format now to the name of the current month. So then I have to take a look at what that token is. So here you have the tokens of Integramod. So then you can see that here I used 4 times D, which is Sunday, Monday, etc. But now we want to use January, February, like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to paste this, and then we're going to hit OK. We click Save. We do Run Once, and we're going to hit Test the Request again. So now it's this. Let's see how that's changing. And then you see here, current day, Tuesday, current day is March. Now I see that I forgot here a quotation mark. So we do this. So then we save again. We test it again. And then here you see that the quotation mark is missing. So we click Test the Request. And then here you see now that it is working. So now we can use these values and we can store them into custom fields. So if you go back over to response mapping, and then you see that they already wrote it out here. So then you have a $sign. Let's zoom in a bit. and then you have a plus, or not a plus, a dot, I mean, and then you have current day. So that is this value, right? This. So we just say, hey, we want to have the value of this key. We want to have Tuesday, and we want to save that in a current day custom field. So if you also would want to save a month, so for example, current month, then here you would select a custom field where you want to save it into. So I don't have a current month custom field, but you could create that, or you could create some kind of multi-field that you can use for everything. So that is basically how this is working. Let me close this. Let me save this. Let me publish this also. And then I want to show you quickly how this looks like inside Messenger. So we have the examples. So here you already see that I was testing if it's really working. So I'm just deleting this. And then we're going to run this once. So then we can also see what is really happening. And then we simply preview it. Then we go over to Integromod, and you see here these bubbles like, hey, this came in, and this was the response that we gave. And then when we go over to Messenger, we see that it indeed says, have a great Tuesday. So that's basically how that works. Then another example that I have, which I also think is really cool, is the ManyChat API. So you can also use this inside your external requests. So for example, if you want to send a flow to another subscriber, so maybe you have some kind of referral program, so somebody joins the bot and then you want to thank the person who invited that person, then you can use something like this. So here you tell what kind of content it is. So you can find this in the API documentation of ManyChat. And then you have to use the authorization. Remember, I told you earlier that the headers can be used for what kind of content it is, or authorization, or also for other things, but it really depends on the tool. So in this case, we need the accept. Now then we tell like, hey, it's JSON, and then we have the authorization. Now then we have the bearer, and then you can enter your token. And then we can say, now we open it, we close it, and then the subscriber ID. Now that would be in here inside the multi-field. That's where I would save it. It's just an example. And this is the flow that I want to send over. So the flow number, so it's just like content, that's this number. So if you want to send over a certain flow, then you can do this. But I don't want to make this tutorial too complicated. This is already really advanced. But I just quickly want to show you for what kind of things you could also use it. So if you want to send a flow to another subscriber from one subscriber, then you could use this. And then you say this, then you put your token in there, and then you have the body, and then you have your subscriber ID. Here you would put the subscriber ID, then you have the flow that you want to send, and then you have the number, which is this one, the number of the flow that you actually want to send. Now, that another example, last but not least, is something that I really like doing. So as my email service provider, I'm using ActiveCampaign, and I really want to add these people into ActiveCampaign without using Integromod or without using Zapier, because it's just faster. And this way it also doesn't cost me any tasks or operations, right? So this is how it works with ActiveCampaign. So you have your URL. So I think from this, it's basically always the same, or this. So here you have your username, then you have your content type. So here you'll see that it's slightly different than from ManyChat. And then here you have application, and then you have this. Oh, I'm doing something weird here. And then you have this. Now then in your body, and then here you already see that we're going a bit deeper, right? So we have the open, we have the close, and then we have the API key. So the API key I have stored in an ActiveCampaign API bot field. So this way, I only have to change the API of ActiveCampaign only in one place when I change it, instead of that I would put it in here. So I really recommend to put API codes into the bot fields, because that will just make things easier for yourself in case you have to change something. Now, and then we have all kinds of other things like AP output, JSON, the email, first name, last name. This is the list, this is the status, and these are custom fields. So if you want to learn more about this, then you can go over to the API documentation of ActiveCampaign. And right now I'm using contact sync. So here it will tell you the endpoint. So where do you have to link to? So you would copy this, you go to URL, and then you see that this is identical. Now, and then it will also tell you here, the content type is this, and these are the things that you have to send over. So here, for example, it says, okay, you have to give your API key in this format, API key. And then here you see that we did API key. Remember, with the fruit and the bananas, it just works like that. Just like here you have the key, the name of the value, and then here you have the value itself. So here it also says, okay, we want to have the email address, use email. Or here we want to have the first name, use first underscore name. So then here we use first underscore name. And then we have here the first name variable. Now, and also with the list status, everything about that, if in case you're using ActiveCampaign, then you can do that. But yeah, this was basically how external requests work in ManyChat, how you can trigger those, how you can integrate Integromat with it to do all kinds of crazy cool things. So I think this is really, really awesome. I know it's like a bit technical, but just start playing around with it. I will also put like an example flow down here where which you can import, and then you can also see these examples that I just showed you. So just remember with JSON, you just open with the curly brackets and you also close with them. Then in between you have the key or the name of the value in between quotation marks. Then you have a colon, and then you have more quotation marks with the value in it. And then when you want to go over to the next value or the next row, you use a comma, except for the last one. Okay, remember that, except for the last one. So I quickly want to go over it one more time. Let's do it one more time. Let's go to the first one. So request URL, we have the request type, the headers. So the tool will always tell you what you have to do with the headers. Then you have the body. So this, I just explained it, how that works. Then you have the response. So here you can just test. So if I click now, probably get some kind of error or get something really weird. Here, bad request. And then we have the response mapping. So here you can also save what you get back into a custom field. So here, when we go over here, you see that we used $, current day, and then we saved it into the current day custom field. And one more thing I want to mention about the dots. So the dots are for how deep this piece of data is. So sometimes the response that you get back is an array, which means it is inside another value. So then it says like, okay, for example, contact, and then it says contact 1, and then it says email address, something like that. So then sometimes you have to use 2 dots. Sometimes you have to use 3 dots, 4 dots. Just experiment with that if you cannot really figure it out. Now, one more tip I want to give is this website. So someone shared this with me and I find it really handy. So when you write out your JSON code, you can also just do that in here. And then you would get here an overview of how this actually works. So maybe I should have actually showed this earlier because it's pretty handy, right? But here, for example, with the bananas, let's do that one more time. So then we say here, fruit, and then we say here, bananas. And then you see here that we have an object and it is fruit, bananas. Now, if we want to add one, then we say here, amount, then here, then we say tree. And then you see here, object is fruit, bananas, amount is tree. So, okay, let's round this up. I've kept you here long enough. I really hope this helps. I really try to explain it step by step, and because I know that this is really complicated, but I hope this way that you really get this and that you can really leverage this awesome action inside ManyChat. Okay, that was this tutorial. If you have any questions, just let me know.